All right. So today starts genetics, okay? And we have seen something similar to this when we talked about meiosis in the last unit. So why do children usually look like their parents? Okay, what about them now? Okay, because you get half from each parent. And sometimes, and I've mentioned this before, sometimes we might look a little more like mom, might look a little more like dad. You know, when we have siblings, sometimes one looks like mom, one looks like dad, and then sometimes you have a good mixture. Like I know growing up, a lot of people told me I look just like my mom, and now that I've gotten older, I look a lot more like my dad. Okay, same thing happens with dogs, and this is a perfect example of my two fur babies. What kind of fur babies do I have? Labradoodle, two of them, right? And then my good old coonhound. So this is not a lab, but close enough. Golden retriever mixed with a poodle makes a golden doodle. So just like my dogs, a Labrador retriever and a poodle mixed together, and they get traits from both breeds, okay? And my dogs, like I've told you in the past too, couldn't be any more different. One is much more lab and one is definitely more poodle, but they still have a mixture of traits from both parents. Also, you might see something like this, and this actually has happened in my family. So you see one that's a lot more tall, a sibling. I mean, some of them are taller. Doesn't mean that that came from mom or dad necessarily, but it could have come from mom and dad's parents. Okay, it could have come from prior generations because traits and genes get passed on from generation to generation. So for example, my brother, he's 6'1". I'm about, let's go 5'5", 5'5.5". My mom and I are about the same height, and my dad's 5'10". Okay, so my dad is 5'10", mom 5'5", 5'6", me like my mom, but then my brother's 6'1". Well, where did he get that from? Well, my mom's dad, my grandfather, he was 6'1". So that's where they get passed on from generation to generation. All right, so now we're going to delve into genetics. So genetics is the study of heredity, which is how traits are passed on to offspring. So a trait is an actual characteristic that varies from one individual to another. So we don't all necessarily have the same traits, but you can share traits. So an example of this would be eye color, okay? Another one would be height. Limb length, okay? So the length of your limbs. Number of fingers. Length of legs proportional to the body. Your ability to carry a tune, which I did not get at all. Risk of developing breast cancer or the sickle cell trait. These are all examples, okay? So then this takes us back to good old Gregor Mendel. Anybody ever heard of him? Okay, so he was a monk who studied pea plants, and he studied all different traits of pea plants, okay? And his study is what is still used a lot in genetics and to teach genetics today. So he talked about pod color, seed shape, and you're going to see that on one of your activities today. So now we're going to start delving into some of the terms that we need to know. So biological inheritance is determined by factors that are called genes, okay? Not the genes that are on your legs, okay? Genes inside, passed on from generation to generation, okay? So a gene is a sequence of DNA. We've talked about DNA and DNA's importance. And that gene, that DNA, codes for a specific trait. Okay, just like we talked about the sequence of DNA and how it codes for protein. The next term you need to know is an allele. You're going to see this term. An allele is a version or form of a gene. And we are going to represent alleles in Punnett squares using letters. And that's what we're going to start tomorrow. So up here, this is the gene for eye color, okay? But we're talking about two different genes. And you notice the difference in color, okay? Because the genes, we have specific alleles. One's coding for brown eyes, the other for blue, okay? So gene for eye color, and then the allele is representing specific eye colors, okay? So in this case, brown and blue. So some alleles are known to be dominant or recessive. So an organism that has a dominant allele is always going to show that trait, okay? And we represent that by a capital letter. And I'm going to bring this all together when we're done. A recessive allele is only expressed when the dominant allele is not present. So the only way, when we are talking about complete dominance, which is the first Punnett square we're going to do tomorrow, is if you have two lowercase letters. That's the only way we can be recessive. If you are capital, you are dominant. And if you are capital lowercase, you are still dominant because there is a dominant allele, okay, for that trait or gene. So for example, capital A is the dominant allele for purple. Lowercase a is the recessive allele and it codes for white. So if you add capital A, your flower would be, if you had capital A lowercase, your flower would still be purple because you have a capital letter. Yes, because it's dominant. So this guy right here, he gets masked. He gets overlooked. He's not seen because there's a dominant letter there. The only way that we can be white is if we have two lowercase letters. That's it. So capital, dominant. Capital lowercase, still dominant. And lowercase is the only way we're recessive. Anything. Eye color, when we talk about complete dominance, because this is going to be super important for tomorrow. Okay? So, for example, we're going to run through examples. You know that I always do this to make sure we got it. So which one's dominant? Black. Recessive? White. So if we have big B, what color? Black. Big B, little b? Still black. Little b? Perfect. Now, we got big B brown, little b blue. Which one's dominant? Recessive? Blue. So if we have big B, little b, so let's see, we switch to eye color. What color are we? Brown. If we have little b, blue. Big B, brown. Perfect. Now we've got big P purple, little p white. Dominant? Purple. Recessive? So little p is? Big P, little p? And big P. Perfect. So now, we're going to start breaking things up even more. So because you inherit one copy of each gene or allele from each parent, you always have two alleles for each gene because you get one from mom and one from dad. So the combination of the alleles is represented by using the same letter to describe that trait. So always a capital and a lowercase of the same letter. Now, I'm going to stress this a lot more tomorrow, but when you get into complete dominance Punnett squares, pick a letter that looks different, capital and lowercase. So the P, probably not so good, right? But an A works. A B works. C, probably not so good. D might work. Okay, so pick and stick with letters that are different, capital and lowercase. Does that make sense? Okay? A Z probably wouldn't be good. Okay? So in the drag and drops, I've already made the letters for you. And you'll see that as you start to go through them, especially starting tomorrow. But when you do it on paper, sometimes the letter might not be there. And so you have to pick your own. And I just suggest that you pick something that's different. Because even if you know your own letter,
you might not.
I might not. Correct. But since we're not doing paper and I kind of already give it to you, we don't need to worry about it so much. But for a test or for DCA or for a quiz or an EOC, okay, your district common. Okay. So for those cases, you might, just for your own sake. All right. So this takes us back to what we just saw, something similar. So the allele for blue eyes is recessive, and the allele for brown eyes is dominant. Okay, so if we're recessive, we're using a little letter, lowercase, and if we're dominant, we're using a big letter, a capital letter. Okay, so because we have a blue and a brown,
It's blue.
it's a big B and a little b, and what color is this going to be? It's going to be brown. What are we going to put here? 2 capital B's, and what color? And blue. Only way it's going to be blue. Okay? So this takes us to the next 2 terms we need to become very familiar with, genotype and phenotype. So genotype, okay, is the genetic makeup. Geno, what word do you hear? A gene, okay? And genes also relate to alleles. And in this case, when we do genotypes, we are going to use alleles, which we represent by capital and lowercase letters for complete dominance. So genotype is genetic makeup, also known as the combination of alleles. So that's our letters. Big B, big B, big B, little b, little b, little b. That is genotype, letters, alleles. Y'all with me? Okay. So the genotype, in this case, she has blue eyes, is going to be little b, little b. Next is phenotype. Phenotype is physical. It's what we actually see. So it is the trait or characteristic that we are talking about. Okay? So hair color or like type of hair. Okay? Straight, curly, wavy. Yes. So phenotype, physical. Physical. What we actually see. So in this case, the phenotype would be blue eyes because we see blue eyes. The genotype is little b, the letters, the alleles. Okay? Last, okay, we did dominant recessive, genotype, phenotype. Last, we have homozygous and heterozygous. So when you pull out the word homo means, that's what you got to know. Hetero means different. So homo means the same, 2 of the same allele. So homozygous could either be big B, or little b, because they're the same. Okay, everybody following me? The only way we can be hetero is if we are different. So different would be big B, little b. Heterozygous. Homo, same, hetero, different. Those are the 2 words you need to know. Same, different. So what would this one be? Hetero, because it's what?
Two different.
Two different. Homo, because it's the homo, because it's the same. Okay? So big B, little b, brown, blue. Big B, brown, brown. Little b, blue, blue. Okay? So now we have to figure out, we already did which ones are homozygous. And it is the last two because they are the same. Okay? Which is heterozygous? The first, because it is different. So now something else that I'm going to toss in here. So this is heterozygous. These are homozygous. The difference between these, this is homozygous dominant. Why?
Because
Boom. And this is homozygous recessive because perfect. Okay? So homo dominant, homo recessive. Everybody with me? All right. So the genotype. Big G, little g. Hetero. Little f, little f. That is homozygous recessive. Very good. Homo recessive. Big O, big O. Homozygous dominant.
I'm sorry, they look the same.
Big W, big W. Homozygous dominant. Blonde hair, genotype or phenotype? Phenotype, why? Because it's a visual. It's what you see. Big B, little b. Genotype or phenotype? Genotype, because it's what? Okay, you can't see it. It's the alleles, the letters. That's how we represent them. Short phenotype. Okay, so we've already kind of done this. The first